Hey guys, so we are again in here, September, high level heroes guides. We are in the method playoffs of the previous method tournament back in June. I know some of these things have been adjusted, but Maiev is still about the same as where she was during those, so I feel this guide is still relevant. So if you guys are unfamiliar, every other day in September, I am doing a high-level hero gameplay guide, and I'm picking apart the different playstyles that people are bringing to competitive games over the last couple months. This was a competitive game. There was prize money on the line, quite a bit. Method put something like, I don't even know, like $3,000, and then it ended up adding up to even more than that. It was wild. Anyways, these players are bringing their best, and Ultralisk is on the Maiev this time. Now, back when HGC was a thing, Maiev was, 100% pick or ban rate, right? She was insanely good because she could make a fight happen out of almost anything, where a lot of other heroes aren't able to do that. This right here is a great example of that. Someone tried to get away, and she came out of nowhere and was able to at least attempt to make a play. It honestly feels like she's playing in fast forward because of how fast Maiev does everything. Now, like Ultralisk does and all the players that I've been talking about, they do prioritize wave clear over a lot of other things. They make sure to cover everything that their team is missing and still do what their hero does best. So I've been doing these videos over September, and I do have sponsors I've been talking about. So I do want to do a quick mention of the sponsor, which is GenoPalette. GenoPalette is a genetic tracking tool, essentially. They look at your genes and they track different aspects of your genes to see how different foods will affect you. They look for different types of allergies or things that you don't really accept very well. And at the same time, they look for things that you can absorb the nutrients a little bit better by having specific genes. Whether it's a gimmick or it's something that's really going to change your life is really going to come down to a wide variety of things. Some people have said that this is amazing and there's a lot of research behind it. Some people have said that it's just a gimmick. But at the end of the day, if you find yourself with like brain fog or just not a lot of energy, there's a good chance that it is your diet that's affecting it. Whether this is going to be the thing that tells you what you should be eating and what you shouldn't be eating, I'm not sure. But maybe this is the thing that just helps out a little bit, and maybe it's not. But at the end of the day, it could be that thing. You can use the code NotParadox, all caps, no spaces, to save $20 on any of their products. You can either bring over a genetic test that you've already done with like Ancestry.com or 23andMe, or you can do it through them and again save $20 by using my code. So thank you guys so much. Just click that link down below if you're interested in it. And it's a pretty cool program. Right there, a lot of damage goes off to Breeze, but you're going to notice that where Maiev's going to really come in handy is grabbing that Deckard, the Rainer, and the Falstad. Everyone else, it's just going to be pretty much just gravy. If you can grab anyone, get any extra damage, that would be great. But overall, those are the targets they're looking for. If they have a lot of damage, Blaze could definitely be another target that they're looking at. They do have Burn the Impure, so they could melt down Blaze pretty quickly if they do catch him. So I'll talk about his build a little bit, but I just want to still continue on the playstyle in the early portions of the game. The playstyle generally is catching the soak for your team, doing the camps, and helping your team get that, while also looking for picks here and there. But overall, it's not fully focused on picks or team fights. It's mostly macro with a tiny bit of picks and a tiny bit of team fight. Now, as far as the talents that he's going, this is what's considered Q build. Q build takes Naish's Memento first, and it allows you to quickly do camps because you can activate this and it bounces between all the enemies in the camps. So you can actually solo a bruiser camp at level 1 with Naish's Memento. Then you have the Q talents for Blade Dance, which deals physical damage around you when you land your Q. And you also have Elun's Wrath. So once again, you're taking all the talents that are enhancing your Q. Now, you don't take the quest here, or at least he doesn't take the quest here. I generally take the quest here. but he's taking the physical armor. I'm not 100% sure why he's going with that, unless he's just taking like the armor benefits of physical, which I'll talk about a little bit later if he ends up going those talents. If not, I'm not going to worry about it. But again, he's playing rather safe. He's not really worrying too much. He's getting a couple free Qs off, quite a few free Qs off, and gets a decent chunk of damage. You can see that Wit is just staying right at the edge while his team grabs fountains and gets healed up again. And now they're just waiting to burn this. Now, once that's burned, he can go in and he can immediately go for a kill, which is exactly what he does. Once the... He was initially going for Joanna because she broke her trait, but Raynor actually stepped up just a little bit too much, and that's all that he needs to get a quick pick. Now he's back on to getting that wave clear. Throws out a Q, he can throw out an E to do a decent amount of damage, or even a W sometimes. While W has a long cooldown, it does do just a little bit. E does the most as far as wave clear, and then Q has the shortest cooldown, so you definitely want to use your E and your Q for wave clear. But yeah, there's a reset, a second one, and a third one. The fourth ended up just doing some damage. So, again, Maiev is, in my opinion, one of the highest skill cap heroes. I would put her in probably the top 5 or 6 as far as the top highest skill cap. The better you get with your Q really determines how much damage you do in fights, while the mobility and the engages that you do really determine how well your team is going to do. So you definitely need a little bit of both. But if you practice on just one of those things at a time, if your team's good at following up, then practicing just the engages is enough to make a huge difference. There was a dorm team that was beating teams considerably higher ranked than them just because they had a Maiev that was good at engaging. She wasn't even that good at landing the Fan of Knives, but she was great at just engaging. Now, as a competitive player, you definitely need to be good at both, but you can certainly practice one before the other. So again, Maiev has insane wave clear if you want to clear a lane really quick and then still try to join your team where you can. So you definitely want to be trying to do that whenever possible, and go from there. They keep trying to prevent the enemies from doing the heal camp, but as far as kills go, they only have 1 kill. They've won 1 objective, and they haven't gotten too much done with that objective. They just got the fountain, so it's easier to win the next objective. But honestly, not too much of a difference. They're just playing it safe, and they're playing the late game, which is one of the things that Maiev does really well. Because death timers get really long, being able to engage and force fights out of almost nothing makes Maiev invaluable for team comps in the late game. The other thing too is they're running Aterial, which is already an amazing hero for late game fights. The downside about running Aterial main tank is you don't have a good engage, but she brings that good engage by pulling people from a mile away and then popping her ult to keep them in a small area to where she gets multiple resets off of Fan of Knives. They're able to take 2 kills here, and they potentially push with it, but I believe, yeah, Maiev just goes back to covering that extra soak. These are the points, if you haven't noticed yet, there's certain points that Ultralisk likes to stay to go for engages. They're usually fog of war areas that are kind of near the fight. So he likes to stay in places like this, when he's approaching a fight down here. When he's approaching a fight up here, he likes to stay right here. Learning locations on every single map where you can pressure and join fights is something that you definitely want to try to do, is learning as many locations where you can force these amazing engages. Because again, there's 2 major pieces of Maiev. Incredible engages, which are absolutely game-changing, and landing multiple Qs, which are the way to really take your Maiev gameplay a little bit up, and also prevent feeling bad about drafting Maiev in one of the damage positions. Because if you draft Maiev, you're forcing your team to only really have 1 sustained damage dealer. And if you miss your Q, you pretty much force your team to only have 1 damage dealer, period. So understanding your Q is definitely going to be able to push it a little bit further. Now, if you're drafting a Maiev for your team and your Maiev isn't that confident with Fan of Knives, I highly recommend drafting a higher damage team comp. And that's what they did. They haven't been playing for a while. They're a little rusty. they ended up drafting a very high damage team comp, so not everything comes down to this Maiev landing every ability. Now, despite all that, Ultralisk is landing a lot of resets on his Fan of Knives, but they do have a lot of extra damage on their team, so it's really, really cool. If you, I still think Tyrael is insanely good for competitive, but you definitely need to run some form of engage. A lot of teams these days that are running Tyrael will simply either just run Judgment, or they'll run it with Leoric. And both are definitely options that you can do, but I think Sanctification is extremely powerful and possibly a little underrated these days. So running a Maiev and a Tyrael is probably, I still think, if you can get coordinated enough, one of the most impactful things you can do. You still need a good follow-up for the Maiev, but I mean, she can set up on almost anything. And you're going to recognize a lot of names on the enemy team, because they were pro players. You have Breeze, you have Wubby, you have Chris, you have Poik, and you have Zalia. All pro players. And so, again, this is one of those games where we're watching someone who has to deal with the most difficult situation, and they're still playing it out really, really well. It's not like people are grouping up a lot. If you're playing Maiev and you get as good as Ultralisk is, and you're in low ranks, I mean, they're just going to stay grouped for Qs, and you're going to wipe them with just Qs alone. But if you can engage and set up for your team in some of the lower divisions, I mean, this is going to be absolutely game-changing. There's reasons why Maiev was first pick, first ban material in the pro scene. So right here, Maiev is staying in a bush. She doesn't want anyone to know. She's telling her team where she's going to be going. And then, and I actually want to switch off of lock, and I want to switch to camera view so you can see where her camera is going and where she's watching. So she ends up throwing her E over there, dodges the stun, pulls in Wubby, and they try to go for an ult with just trying to hit just Wubby, but they end up hitting a few more people. But Ultralisk hasn't used any major cooldowns outside of possibly Naish's Memento. And now Wubby goes back, or sorry, Ultralisk goes back in, pops an ult, gets the Sanctification, and just gets Q after Q after Q, and even just a bunch of auto attacks. Because one thing people don't know about Maiev is her auto attack DPS is actually pretty good. At level 14, she's doing almost 300 DPS with auto attacks. So that is definitely not an amount of DPS that you scoff about. You know, that's a decent chunk. So he was able to set up the initial fight, force the enemies to use a few defensive abilities a little too early, and then go back in again, pop the ult, and lead to an amazing team fight in combination with Sanctification, and completely dominate. So that is something that is something that Maiev did that no one else would have been able to do in that situation. Learning Maiev, I want to tell you guys, again, she's difficult, but the first thing that everyone needs to know on Maiev, her wave clear is good, and in this build, you can do camps early with Naish's Memento. Utilize the fact that you have amazing macro in the early game, and abuse that, right? You need to utilize it, because these amazing team fights are kind of pointless in the early game. Early game deaths are not worth that much. Late game deaths are worth a lot. And drafting a Maiev to do nothing in the entire early game is just dumb. Utilize her amazing macro potential in the early game, and then in the late game, get really good at those engages. I recommend practicing them a lot. If you have the opportunity to run drills in a custom game mode, do that. And if not, just try it out in try mode. Try out a bunch of different combos of Spirit of Vengeance, Warden's Cage, and your Umbral Bind. In this case, they win the objective. Maiev decides to call out Warrens in that direction because that's where Blaze starts heading through. She goes, gets a bit of soak for her team, and she goes to get one more wave. I think that when someone's in the Protector, she doesn't think that she has enough damage, or at least Ultralisk, he doesn't think that he has enough damage to be able to actually get any value off of any major engage, because the Protector doesn't actually do a lot of hero damage. It's mainly just structure damage. So right here, as the Protector is getting a little bit lower, once again, where did he go? A little corner where he could throw his E in and get an engage. Let's talk about his later talents. Now that we've talked about his playstyle in the early game, the playstyle in the mid game, the playstyle in the late game, his later talents that he ends up going for are Fan of Knives granting armor. Each hero you hit gives 5 armor for 5 seconds, stacks up to 20. I didn't know if he was going to go for like the physical armor thing, but this is really what he ended up going with there. And then Armored Assault says armor increases physical damage dealt. So that's why he went with the physical damage here, is because he's going to be able to have armor on the entire time with Q, and every Q that he lands is going to be doing 20% more damage with the AoE physical, as well as your extra damage. So you see he popped Naish's Memento, and you can see the little bounce going back and forth. Very quick at doing camps. Almost no issues doing camps whatsoever. Now, you lose the Naish's Memento, but at the rate that he's landing his Qs, he can reset it rather quickly. So the way that you get this talent back is by hitting at least 2 people with a Fan of Knife. And if you can do that, then you'll be able to get the Naish's Memento back so you can do it for wave clear again. You always start with 1, so you don't need to get the first one. So right here, I want to talk a little bit about his combo on what he does when he approaches a fight. He goes in with his E, and then he lands his W. Then he immediately pops Warden's Cage. Now, the reason why a lot of people immediately pop Warden's Cage after you W, instead of waiting to see if your W triggers first, is because a lot of people stay within your W range, and you kind of want to have them pop back and forth a little bit, because not only is that extra damage on your W, but that's also kind of like mini stuns back and forth. So what people like to do is they like to hit the W, pop the R, and then pull them towards their team, which will then force them back and then pull them back closer to their team. Now, once you pop the W and the ult and you start walking away, feel free to just mash your Q button as long as you're actually going to be able to land it, because you're just going to right-click once over on the side, and then while you're right-clicking once, you're just going to be able to land Q, 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 Q as often as possible, which you're going to see over and over and over and over, where he completely dominates their team. So not only did he set up an amazing fight for his team, he also followed up his own setup and completely destroyed the enemies. And that shows you why Maiev is insane, and shows you the high-level hero guide for Maiev on the playstyle that you want to do, the combo that you want to learn for this Q build, as well as just some engage points. Feel free to watch high-level Maiev's play and watch where they sit whenever they're trying to engage on people. A lot of these engages that he's done have been in Fog of War. He's been in Fog of War, but also the enemies have been in Fog of War. He just guesses because he's like, hey, they're likely to be here. You even saw him telling people where the blaze was going to be. So, I mean, that's the kind of play that you're going to see out of these players, these high-level players. So level 20 is where there's a lot of debate on Maiev on what to take. Many Maiev players that that are the engage for their team will not take the talents that you would think they are going to take, which is this to reset your E. They will actually take Shadow Orb Huntress, giving yourself movement speed, as well as attack speed. Now, the attack speed's kind of relevant, or irrelevant. But you also will have that movement speed going almost all the time, because all the physical damage that you're dealing to everyone around you, as well as Naish's Memento, is going to make this have almost no cooldown. It's going to recharge almost instantly. So what people do with this makes you faster than mount speed. You get that extra movement speed, and you can rush in to get in range for a really good E to set up for your team, and you can engage almost out of nowhere. And that's what a lot of people run. Now, there is a lot of debate on whether or not Shadow Orb Vengeance is the play, and what this one does is it resets your Spirit of Vengeance, so you can E in, reset it, and E in again, and then grab a team that's even further away than Huntress. Recharging this means that you have to damage enemy heroes with Spirit of Vengeance 5 times. That's a lot harder to recharge, because you're probably going to dive in, get this amazing engage, and you're never going to use your E to just do damage, which is why a lot of people still recommend the Shadow Orb Huntress over Vengeance, because this is easier to reset, and you can use this for every single fight. Hopefully that explains the reasons for those 2 different talents, because there is a lot of debate between those 2 different talents. There's also the slow, but that's generally not used that often. So again, he's just playing the macro out. Now they have the level 20 lead, and generally on Maiev, you want to try to force a fight. Or generally on Maiev, you can force any fight. And generally at level 20, you want to force a fight when you have level 20 and the enemies don't. So once again, we have that fog of war. We're just waiting for a little bit of vision. We're waiting to see where the enemies are going. But the enemies, remember, they're all pro players, ex-pro players. So they're not just going to walk into a fight at 20. They're going to try to soak as safely as possible, and Maiev's going to have to do a lot to try to pressure this, or force this fight. She ends up just giving up on that and just going for the wave clear here. Clears up a couple waves, and heads up top and does the same thing. Just clears up a couple waves. Doesn't really worry about anything too crazy here. Their team could go for that that turret if they want to. I'm surprised that Maiev hasn't checked to see what the respawn time of the turret is. Maybe they already called it in comms, so she didn't really need that info. But yeah, so this will hopefully show what Maiev should do at level 20 and what a really good engage looks like at level 20. Now, I've heard people say, well, okay, well, you don't want to lose a damage dealer by picking Maiev, so would it be worth running Maiev in the solo lane? I've seen teams do it, but there's a lot of reasons why you don't. She doesn't have a lot of self-sustain. The only self-sustain she has is globes and fountains. So that's one big reason why you don't want to run her in the solo lane. Another reason is that her Fan of Knives is really weak outside of getting resets. So if you don't get any resets, it's just not that good. So she's just rather weak in the solo lane. Sure, you have the double soak potential and you have great flanking engages, but that's all you really bring to the table, so I don't recommend her in the solo lane. Now you see here, I said in the Protector you have really bad team fights, so she ended up just pops in the Protector because there's no point in like forcing an engage while you're in the while your team's in the Protector. So it's better for Maiev to get in the Protector. Now, this is something that high-level teams do that I wish more teams would do. Coordinated teams anyways. Non-coordinated teams, just stay in the Protector, use its full health bar. But in coordinated teams, you can hop out of the Protector and you can force a team fight after the enemies have wasted a lot of abilities trying to take down the Protector. You can hop out of the Protector and then you can immediately force a fight. Usually you want the gunner to leave first so that the driver can give shields to 4 members of your team and then hop out and you can do whatever you want to do. Instead, their gunner hops out first, their driver hops out first and their gunner stays. So it's a little strange how they did this. But then the Maiev hops out, drops down the heal camp first, immediately engages, pulls everyone in, and starts trying to get some Qs off. Unfortunately, that doesn't actually do anything major. They have to drop down all of their turrets just to survive, and they still end up losing their Kharazim. So overall, that was a very unsuccessful engage. They got a keep, which is good, but they lost 5 things and a Protector and a hero for that. This is actually a really cool engage though. He immediately goes into the Falstad, pulls in the Falstad, the Blaze, doesn't have his ult available, but that doesn't really matter. He's still able to get a kill there. He uses the extra movement speed to quickly catch up and try to go for another person, and they can pretty much close out the game now with the pretty high sustained damage that she does with the auto attacks, as well as having everyone but Kharazim alive is enough to be able to close out this game. That's exactly what they do. So what have we learned? The early game, focus on macro, a couple picks here and there. Mid game, you're going to be focusing on picks particularly to win the objectives. The combo that you do when you're engaging is you do an E, a W, an R, step backwards, and as you're stepping backwards, you're going to be spamming Fan of Knives. And then when you're in these late game fights, you're going to activate Huntress so that you can get closer to get a really good engage for your team. The Protector is a weakness as much as it is a strength. By putting 2 people in the protector, you're increasing your ability to siege, but you're decreasing your ability to team fight. So that is not only how you can win a game, but it's also how you can lose a game. And if you're on against a protector, that's how you counter a protector push. So that's everything that we've learned from this game. The final build that we see is Nayash's Memento for early camp clear, as well as extra physical damage. Blade Dance for extra physical damage every time that you throw out a Q. Elune's Wrath just for extra damage on your Q. Warden's Cage because it allows for an amazing engage. Bladed Armor so that you can get some extra armor whenever you have your Qs hitting people. Increased physical damage while you have armor, which you should almost always have. And then finally, Shadow Orb Huntress, which increases your movement speed and it recharges based off of your physical damage dealt. And that is the Q build for Maiev from Ultralisk and how to play it and what to do when you are playing that. You don't need to focus heavily on kills, but you certainly can get picks here and there. And that is how they play against a team of old pro players. So that was pretty awesome. Thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to check out any of my other videos. And again, if you want to catch the rest of these in September, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell, so you guys can see the rest of my videos every other day in September. I'm going to be bringing out these high-level hero guides, so make sure to check out all of those. And yeah, thank you guys for watching this entire video.